Hi, it's Rupert Hine from Action Coach here, and I'm joined today by Nick Jones of Zumo Money. Welcome, Nick.
Hi, Rupert.
So Nick, tell us a bit about Zumo Money.
Okay, yeah. So Zumo is a digital assets cryptocurrency business based here in the UK. We are one of the FCA's registered businesses and now regulated under the Financial Services and Markets Act. Founded in 2018, we focus on providing our technology out to other fintechs, banks, institutions to allow them to launch kind of compliant solutions in the space.
Fantastic. So, getting involved in fintech, getting involved providing services, particularly in sort of the emerging worlds of cryptocurrency and all of that feels to someone like me as a bit of a massive step. So, how did you start?
Yes, I've always been. I've more by initial luck than judgment, but I've always been involved in kind of emerging technologies. So going back to 2000, my first kind of proper job after a couple of kind of not great graduate jobs, I was with an American company called GoTo.com, who invented the concept of pay-per-click advertising online. So they basically invented the concept that ended up powering what we would probably call Web 1 and then Web 2 through search. They were bought by Yahoo. Very nascent. It was just after the dot-com bubble burst when everyone was telling us the internet was just a fad and it would never last. There was no commercial model that could work. And I got to go and work in this incredibly exciting, Silicon Valley backed company, which went from 8 people in Europe to 500 in about 18 months. And the company had a very successful exit to Yahoo in 2004, and I got to make a bit of money, which was nice for the first time in my life. And but also having seen that journey, very exciting, being part of that and sort of being part of seeing this new technology being proved right and really starting to see the applications. And I think I've been fortunate enough to just be involved in a lot of stuff like that in my career. So worked at Yahoo for a while. I was involved in launching um, first mobile advertising product globally anywhere before anybody had a smartphone. When it was very very nascent, when people were, it was kind of a bit of a crazy seeming idea that anyone would ever look at an ad on their little color screen or green screen mobile phone. So involved in that. Yahoo was a fascinating place to work. Not as it turned out probably the most effective, but they invented all sorts of stuff in that period, like internet radio, instant messaging, social media, and obviously we sort of saw Facebook coming in that time. So part of the kind of the proving of the Web 1 piece, Web 2, sort of integrally involved in a lot of those trends that were coming through with the move from desktop to mobile devices and all these things that people said weren't going to happen. I remember standing up at a conference in, would it have been 2005, 2006, 2005, with a one of the first Sony smartphones, the flip phones, and saying everyone's going to have one of these and we'll all be accessing the internet through this. And it was kind of laughed out the room at the time. So yeah, I've always been lucky to work with clever technologists, which I'm not at all, and been fascinated by what creates those triggers and why things go from being completely abnormal and people can't, and then suddenly everyone's got one and they're being used, and trying to judge when the right time to get involved in something is. So Yahoo was a classic example of a business that entered a lot of those markets at the wrong time. So Yahoo One, which was their social media platform, they had a Netflix, a video streaming rival before anybody really had the bandwidth to stream video at home. So they had all these incredible engineering, but they often got market timing wrong, and that just being a really interesting lesson. So anyway, I'll fast forward a bit because it's a long answer to a short question. But the crypto blockchain piece for me is I've had about 4 or 5 years out of being operational in businesses, doing some angel investing on the back of a couple of exits, one in the digital media space, and one in kind of big data analytics, machine learning, and was consciously or subconsciously trying to sort of see what I was going to tie myself to next. And my co-founder Paul, who is the clever technologist that I mentioned previously, that is good to hang around if you're not. He had done a lot of work on blockchain, and it piqued my interest on a couple of levels. And not least, I had seen fairly up close that there was going to be a big backlash against some of the Web2 stuff that people now don't like. You know, data, the kind of data as oil, and humans being the kind of humans not really being the customers anymore, the advertisers being the customers, and all this stuff around data sovereignty. So I got very attracted to blockchain. I started to understand that the technology could disrupt a number of elements, which is now beginning to disrupt probably 5 or 6 years later. And then cryptos are kind of lead into that. And look, for 5 years we've been in it, I think we're probably a bit early. It's probably a bit earlier than I'd like to. If I could ever had a time machine, I'd probably wait until about I might wait. But then you obviously learn massive amounts of lessons on the time, and we're seeing now the type of adoption of both the underlying tech and the economics, almost with crypto as the kind of proof of concept, but the actual tokenization and the use of blockchain now, what we're seeing across financial services and everyday life. We're all going to have central bank digital currencies, and within 10 years, all of these things are being enabled through blockchain. So yeah, I think probably this one we're a bit this one possibly a bit early, but we've learned some very interesting lessons along the way and built a very kind of resilient business from being part of that. So yeah, so it was a super long answer, but
no, it's fascinating. So you've seen the potential that blockchain can bring, particularly in protecting the consumer, I guess, in terms of protecting their data, helping them to carry out the basic things that we all expect to be able to do in day-to-day life, but opening up the world of crypto. You've produced, with your clever technologist, a great platform that you're now integrating with the big financial institutions. So how did you set about getting the big traditional financial institutions interested in the new kid on the block, so to speak?
Well, it's still work in progress. It's obviously still work in progress, I think, is the answer. And probably UK, from a what we call in our world TradFi perspective, is probably a bit of a laggard compared to some other markets. But I think it's always use cases. It's always real world. Whatever drives technology forwards is efficiency and use and actual use cases. So does something provide a better experience to what was there before, or more efficient, or whatever it is, whether it's cost saving or profit driving, or it's more enjoyable to use, it will always come down to that. So what's driving it I guess what's driving it in our space is kind of emerging use cases, whether they're investment based, whether they're kind of back end infrastructure based. Those use cases are what kind of sells your product for itself, and that's kind of, it's not uncommon in if I go back to that early internet phase, there was a point in time when our biggest client at GoTo.com, our two biggest clients were two private number plate dealers, because they'd worked out that they were very early in understanding, and very clever people who'd worked out very early that internet search was an amazing way of selling private number plates. And but obviously, you probably fast forwarded 3 years, and the two biggest clients would have been massive household, would have been massive, would probably been British Airways and somebody else. So you kind of get this, you get this kind of snowballing effect with adoption, which is always driven by, is it a better channel, or does it work better than something else? So I think that it's probably the stuff you have to do to set yourself up to be able to work with those institutions in making yourself as friendly to them. Same in any selling situation, you have to remove as many barriers as you possibly can. So some of the basics are employ good governance across the business, work to be as regulated as possible, because that's what people who are buying in that space are familiar with. Be really careful with data and security. So there's some real fundamentals here that whether we were selling a crypto product or a KYC product or a whatever it was, those fundamentals, they're only going to be able to deal with you if you've got those fundamentals covered off. And then the product piece is the product piece will have to be driven by use case.
So I get really interested in the whole level of going for sort of maybe not zero risk, but de-risking products. So making sure that the product or service you produce is of a known quality. And in the world that you're trading in, mistakes matter. It's going to erode trust fast if you have bugs in the system. So how do you go about, as you develop the initial product and as you develop enhancements to it, how do you go about going for that sort of zero failure approach?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's extremely challenging in blockchain, I think, is the answer, because the development, one of the things that's held the industry back is how challenging it is to develop in the space. It's complex. There's obviously been some massive improvements in that over the last couple of years, in terms of the actual protocols that you're building on. So if the underlying if the foundations are better, then it's easier to build something good on top of them. So that has been there's been some huge shift forwards. I mean, the big one that most people have read about is the Ethereum network moving from proof of work to proof of stake last year. One of the biggest IT projects, certainly the biggest open source IT project ever delivered with no downtime. Incredible positive story that sadly got lost in the FTX debacle and everything else. Everyone just kind of missed it. Basically, it's been an amazing success. And if you look at that, what that's allowing, with some bumps in the road, what that's starting to allow to be delivered, you're starting to see the potential coming through. So look, you can't. I think a zero failure world is almost impossible to go for. I think anyone that's ever worked in a bank or in fintech will tell you that they only ever find out about stuff going wrong when it goes wrong. What's wrong with a piece of computer software? We find out when all your cash machines go down, or or the website goes down. I'm immediately thinking of the whole Lloyds TSB app replatforming debacle from 5 or 6 years ago. You only find out, unfortunately, however much. So the way you mitigate it is you QA everything to absolute, as far as you can, and you invest in that area. It's certainly something that if I look at one of the things that's been successful for us over the last 18 months or so is investing heavily into QA and going for people and skill sets who are not just thinking, who are the superstar developers. It's who are the superstar QA people who make sure that everything that goes out the door is perfect. Are the DevOps people right? So it's having balanced. It's having a part of it is also having a balanced team. So you need a balanced team. You need people who are doing the innovation, who are right at the cutting edge, and then you need a load of other people who are absolutely just focused on the detail and making sure that everything that goes out the door is right. I think the other thing that people probably underestimate here is just culturally, it's a cultural thing within a company, and I think that someone said I'm part of a few different WhatsApp and Telegram groups with various fintech founders on, and I laughed a lot because it's because it was so true. Someone had put, "What are your biggest lessons on having been a fintech founder?" And the first person response was, "I found out that moving fast and breaking things doesn't work in fintech." And it's like, yeah, yes, because the ramifications are, and so you're always balancing that need to move quickly and innovate with, the need for things to be really buttoned down. And I think it's like any, as I say, a lot of it comes back to some of its processes. So having the correct processes before anything's launched, and culturally making sure your business embraces that, and then making sure you have a team that's diverse in terms of skill sets, that you have a balance of people who we always talk about that engine entrepreneurship excellence idea, and the fact you have a balance of it. If you have a whole, businesses fail because they're full of people who are entrepreneurial and no one's doing the engine bit, or businesses don't grow fast enough because everyone's focused on excellence and there's no entrepreneurship, or businesses build incredible products but nothing ever happens with them if it's just engines. So that's like a huge belief for me, that you've got the balancing out those three things allows you to grow and deliver really good quality all at the same time, which is the hard bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he said zero fail, of course, as you say. I mean, we learn by failing, so it's sort of fail fast, but fail before it gets to the customer.
Yeah.
So you've talked there about the importance of culture and having the right people, having a diverse workforce who can hit all those different aspects, but sort of pulled together with the culture. So how do you set about finding the right people to fit your business?
So I think investing in a kind of people function, and investing in, I mentioned before, culture, and investing in putting that at the center of a kind of recruitment process. And there's definitely a bit of trial and error involved. We had when we spent most of our life as a business as a kind of fully remote business. We won't move from that model now. It doesn't make any sense. We have to look for engineering talent in particular. And actually we found the benefits outweigh there are definitely downsides. But one of the ways of mitigating that is really hiring people who really embrace extra responsibility, and who embrace the kind of flexibility that they get, and work better in a situation where you're kind of managing people by outcomes rather than walking around and asking them what they're doing and what's on your list for today kind of thing. And so I think for us, it's part of a broader sort of slightly kind of existential piece around who do we, what types of people do we want? And the answer is we want lots of different types of skill set, but we want people who are really aligned on values, and on how they want to work and what they see success as looking like. So it's trying to really, really focus on people who are really, really outcome driven all the time, and then that theory, it makes recruitment much harder, but it makes managing people much easier, because you're actually not having to do huge amounts of management. You're goal setting and helping people understand how they're doing on the path to delivering those goals, rather than being micromanaging people all the time, which definitely does not work remotely. That's a path to madness. I think it can work in office situations, in particular instances, but it doesn't work in a remote first environment. And so I think that's it. And you'll have everybody bought into that. Everybody's got to buy into that process. You need to talk to people about what the benefits are. Empower hiring managers with really good technology. So using really good platforms to streamline the workflow, because no one enjoys recruiting people, really. It's not, and a lot of that is down to admin and workflow challenges. So using clever tech to streamline workflow management processes and make it as easy as possible, and make sure you've got the right checks and balances in place, so that you're always getting a good second view of a candidate, and all those opinions are being assessed correctly. I think it's one of those things you have to, as I say, it's just one of those things that just takes a bit of time, and you have to work on, and you probably your company's process should be unique to you. I don't think there's a cookie cutter. I don't believe there's a cookie cutter approach. I think there's lessons. Of course, there's best practices and things you can learn, but your company's approach to it will be quite bespoke to your business, I think.
Yeah. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned as an employer since you began in business?
So the biggest lesson. There's a number of biggest lessons, I suppose. I mean, probably if I go back to that kind of entrepreneurship engine excellence idea, I think it is about how do you try and manage a business in a balanced way. So you can't manage a business just off a spreadsheet. Okay, but if you don't manage a business off a spreadsheet, you're going to run out of money. But if you manage the business off a spreadsheet and don't set an exciting vision for the employees, then no one will stay. But if you just focus on the vision, then yeah, as I say, you'll run out of money. If you don't have a great sales function, so to me, it's really it is about trying to create a really kind of balanced view. And I think most businesses index, certainly startups anyway, will often index heavily towards the kind of mindset or skill set of the founders, because people, especially younger people, often hire people who are just like themselves. And actually, what you're trying to do is have that balance in the team as well. So I think that's it. It's probably not a very exciting. It's not a very exciting one, but I think that captures all of the other things you could say with things like make sure you've got your cash flows all sorted, or make sure you only hire superstar people. I mean, I think all that stuff is captured within and it's about treating the disciplines. It's about treating the disciplines equally. So your finance function is as important as your product function, is as important as your dev function, is as important as your sales function, is as important as your marketing function. You can get short-term success from being really good at only one or two of those things. But if you're trying to build something over the longer term and execute really well, you have to be able to do all of that. You have to be able to do all of those things together. And I think all the most successful companies have all done that. And the other one, probably the overriding issue outside of that, because that's obviously all internal kind of controllables. The other one is just listen to your customers. You have to. We live in a world where getting feedback is really, really, really easy, and still very, very, very not enough. Let's say that's not fair, but not enough businesses. Having been on the investor side of the table, but not enough businesses do enough listening to what their customers or prospective customers actually want.
Well,
and that is where the very successful companies have been so successful.
It's so easy for people to provide feedback, and if nobody listens, it's very easy for them to provide feedback very publicly. But it's a massive resource. So that's fantastic. So listen to your customers and have a truly balanced team where all your functions are in harmony.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds easy, doesn't it? It sounds easy, but I think that you can kind of encompass all the cliches around everything. That encompasses pretty much everything, and I think that does, because you have to execute. To be able to execute that, you have to hire well, and you have to kind of keep in mind this idea of again, we touched on it earlier, but this idea of having people with lots of different diverse skill sets, but a fairly common view of what good and success and the right way to behave and treat each other and act looks like. What I find is really fascinating about this business, and it's something that's grown more and more, having always worked in sort of multinational and fairly kind of multicultural organizations, but this one is a kind of an extreme, and that we have people in, I don't know what it is, something like 18 countries or something, in a pretty small team. Is that the sort of commonality of spirit or values thing isn't impacted by people being from different places. You just have to ask people the right questions and understand that they might play it back to you slightly differently depending on what their cultural influences have been. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. A very interesting time to have built a business in this one. I know we used that unprecedented word far too much during the pandemic, but I think you're allowed to use it again now. It has been an unprecedented time to start and run a business with everything that's been going on in the macro environment in the last few years.
Yeah,
it's an interesting book.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really good. So, for all those people out there who are looking at the challenges of team, recruiting the right values, getting the right people so that you can weld them together as a team, no matter which of the 18 countries they're in, with their own cultural differences, and balance the functions out, are some really powerful lessons for everyone to put into their businesses. Yeah, Nick, that's been absolutely superb. Thank you very much for sharing that with us.
No problem. Thanks, Rupert.